The autumn rain pattered against the eaves, and the myriad palace pavilions stood silently in this night rain. I folded my umbrella and handed it to the attendant behind me before stepping into the hall. Inside, it was silent, with only 2 attendants present, while His Majesty sat up, draped in his robe, in the dim candlelight. He often did this, waking in the dead of night and sitting alone until dawn. Noticing my approach from outside the hall, he sensed something unusual. "What's happened?" I knelt on the floor tiles, looking up at him. Over the years, he had aged rapidly. Though still in his prime, his temples were already streaked with gray. "Your Majesty," I choked with sorrow. "The one in the Western Garden has passed away." His fists clenched suddenly, his eyes gradually turning bloodshot, his entire being taut like a drawn bowstring, as if any word I uttered could make him snap. He shook his head slightly. "What did you say?" His health had been failing for years, worsening in the last 2, and the imperial physician said it was a heart ailment, incurable by medicine. I answered softly, "She has passed away." He sprang to his feet, the attendants quickly reaching out to support him, but he waved them away and stumbled towards the outside. I followed him into the night. He was still in his nightclothes, which clung to him, soaked by the rain. He hurried along, nearly tripping several times. I followed closely as we made our way to the Western Garden. It was his first time here in 10 years. Previously, he had ordered a tall tower built on Punlai Island in the jade washing pool, from which he could gaze at the Western Garden. Yet, for some reason, once the tower was built, he never went up. White banners were already hung in the Western Garden. He stepped through the flower-covered archway but stopped. Sobs could be heard faintly, each sound pounding like a drum in the night. His figure wavered, and as I caught up to support him, I saw his chest stained with blood and his lips still tinged with it. Yet he smiled, with an unfathomable sorrow in his eyes. "At parting, you earnestly sent me off with words full of endless longing. On the 7th night of the 7th month, in the Hall of Longevity, when no one else was around, we whispered our secrets." He recited slowly, each word clear until his voice faded into silence. In the early part of the 14th year of Qingping, I began serving at the imperial court. I later followed my master, Lu Xian, the head eunuch who had been by the emperor's side almost his entire life. As he grew older, he started teaching me the proper etiquette and rules to serve the emperor diligently in the future. Despite the saying, to serve a king is like to serve a tiger, the emperor was actually very kind to those around him. Moreover, since I served the emperor personally, the ladies and concubines of the palace dared not offend me, making my days relatively easy, except for dealing with concubine Yin of Xianfu Palace. Although the emperor had many concubines, he was a man of both literary and martial talents, dedicated to governance and rarely indulging in pleasures of the flesh. Since his ascension, only concubine Yun had ever received his favor. He spoiled her almost beyond reason, indulging her every whim with a smile, no matter how outrageous her behavior. Like everyone else in the palace, I could not understand why the emperor favored concubine Yun so much. She was not particularly beautiful, merely the daughter of a 5th-rank military officer from the capital, with an ordinary family background lacking noble manners. She couldn't read or write, let alone be considered well-educated. This palace was filled with splendid beauties, many of whom awaited a glance from the emperor. Yet, the one the emperor cherished was none other than concubine Yun. On her birthday, which coincided with the Mid-Autumn Festival, the emperor had a banquet in the afternoon. After the morning court session, he instructed me to deliver his birthday gift to concubine Yun, which naturally consisted of exquisite pearls and jade ornaments. When I arrived at Xianfu Palace, I found the other concubines there to offer their congratulations. Despite concubine Yun's arrogance and numerous enemies within the palace, her position as the emperor's favorite meant no one dared to offend her, and outward courtesies had to be observed. As I made my way there, I encountered Consort Da from Chengqian Palace and concubine Ning from Hanliang Hall. Consort Da had entered the palace early and remained favored due to the emperor's sentimentality. Concubine Ning, however, was pitiable. Despite being in the palace for over 10 years and giving birth to the emperor's eldest son, she never gained his favor and remained a concubine all these years. The two had been close friends for many years, perhaps because they were once pregnant at the same time. Unfortunately, while concubine Ning's child survived, consort Da's child died shortly after birth. I paid my respects to the two ladies. Consort Da exchanged pleasantries with me, while concubine Ning remained aloof and silent. Is concubine Ning well these days? I asked her deliberately. She looked slightly surprised but responded with a distant smile. I am well. Thank you for your concern. She certainly didn't remember me. 7 years ago, when I had just entered the palace, I was assigned menial tasks in the Department of Eunuchs and was once sent to clean Hanliang Hall. I accidentally broke a lampstand, and the supervising eunuch was about to punish me when concubine Ning intervened and spared me. It was a small matter, but one that I remembered gratefully. After greeting them, I entered Xianfu Palace and read out the emperor's decree, having a eunuch present the bestowed gifts. Soon after, the emperor arrived. He had changed out of his court robes and, upon entering the courtyard, glanced over the bowing concubines, pausing briefly on consort Da before allowing everyone to rise. With a smile, he walked over to concubine Yun. The next event was a private performance in the rear pavilion, where the emperor had invited the 4 great opera troupes of the capital for concubine Yun's entertainment. Since the emperor was present, the other concubines were reluctant to leave. However, concubine Ning stepped forward and said, "Your Majesty, I am not feeling well and wish to withdraw. Please grant me permission to leave." The emperor did not even look at her, merely holding concubine Yun and turning away, showing no signs of anger, as if he didn't care at all. This prompted some concubines to murmur, "No wonder she doesn't receive favor despite having a son. With that demeanor, who would bother to look at her?" Concubine Ning must have heard, but paid no attention, leaving quietly. Consort Da quickly followed her. Watching her retreating figure, I saw a frail and slender form with a straight back exuding a dignified pride, as if everything in the palace was beneath her notice. I turned to follow the others to the rear pavilion. When we arrived, the emperor and concubine Yun were already seated in the front row. A maid presented the program list to the emperor for him to select a play. Concubine Yun leaned in closely, and the emperor said, "You love the Palace of Eternal Life, so let's choose to send love." Concubine Yun's face turned cold. When did I ever like the Palace of Eternal Life? The emperor must be thinking of someone else and mistook it for me. I don't enjoy that at all. The emperor remained silent. Though he usually indulged her, especially since today was her birthday and the melancholy tone of that play was indeed unsuitable, he said, "I like it." The performance soon began and concubine Yun, sulking, refused to watch. I glanced at the emperor, seeing him staring at the stage, but his mind seemed to be elsewhere. I had rarely seen him so lost in thought, wondering what was on his mind. In a room full of people, none seemed genuinely engaged with the performance. After a while, I looked up at the stage, where the performers continued their singing. Parting words of affection convey endless longing. On the 7th day of the 7th month, in the Hall of Eternal Life, when no one is around at midnight, the tune, originally tender and lingering, suddenly turned sharp and heart-wrenching, like a silk fabric torn apart. Who knew that the lovebirds would die, leaving behind endless regret? That winter, news came from Huaying Hall that the emperor's eldest son, Chongning, had fallen ill. Chongning was born to concubine Ning, and he was the emperor's only son. According to palace customs, princes moved to Wenhua Hall to attend lectures at the age of 6 and must then leave their mother's palace. However, Chongning was an exception. Shortly after concubine Ning gave birth, the emperor ordered the child to be taken away to live in Huaying Hall, cared for by wet nurses and nannies. Concubine Ning's father, Shuehe, was once the Jidushi of Dingzhou, a critical northern garrison with tens of thousands of troops. To win Shuehe's allegiance, the emperor brought concubine Ning into the palace early in his reign. She had been married before and only entered the palace after her husband's death. But soon after, the Xue family conspired with Prince Wei to rebel. Xue He was executed, and concubine Ning's elder brother, Xue Yi, was exiled. From then on, the emperor despised concubine Ning. Everyone said that the emperor only kept her because she bore him a son. Upon hearing of Changning's illness, the emperor went directly to Huaying Hall after court. I followed behind him. As soon as we stepped into the hall, I saw concubine Ning sitting by the bed. She wore a plain dress and looked haggard and sorrowful. The palace attendants all knelt to greet the emperor, but she seemed oblivious, sitting there quietly. Sometimes I wondered, though everyone said she lacked the emperor's favor, among all the concubines in the palace, she alone could maintain her dignity in front of him. The emperor approached, and indeed, Changning looked very ill. The emperor had always been indifferent to him, so the boy looked fearful upon seeing him. I turned to look at concubine Ning and saw tears streaming down her cheeks. At that moment, I was inexplicably startled. I had only ever seen her composed and indifferent, never so sorrowful. Perhaps she was heartbroken that because of her, her son was deprived of his father's love. The hall was silent for a while, then I heard the emperor say softly, "Ninger, tell your mother to stop crying." Perhaps it was my imagination, but his voice seemed to carry a gentleness and tenderness I had never heard before. Changning reached out to wipe away concubine Ning's tears. I watched as the emperor stood behind her, his gaze lingering on her, his lips moving as if he had something to say to her, but in the end, he turned away without a word. Concubine Yun enjoyed the emperor's boundless favor, but this also placed her in a precarious position, making her a target of much jealousy and intrigue. In the winter of the 14th year of Qingping, peachwood dolls and other talismanic objects were found in Xianfu Palace, with a doll inscribed with the birth date and time of Changning. The emperor ordered a thorough investigation, and concubine Yun was confined to Xianfu Palace. Her maids and eunuchs were taken to the court of the imperial clan for questioning. At dusk, I entered Xichen Hall. The emperor sat behind the imperial desk, and I respectfully reported, "Your Majesty, the people of Xianfu Palace say that concubine Yun requests an audience." Without looking up, the emperor replied indifferently, "I will not see her." Concubine Yun is said to have been fasting, I cautiously added. "Liang Quan," he called me, handing over a letter. "Here is a letter. Deliver it to concubine Ning personally." I took it and noticed the small characters in the lower right corner, from Brother Shui. Shui, concubine Ning's brother, had been exiled to Lingnan, forbidden to return for life, with only letters allowed to be sent. Just as I received it, the emperor walked out, ordering the servants to prepare his carriage for Xianfu Palace. I had heard that the reason concubine Yun gained the emperor's favor was due to an incident in Shanglin Park, where he saw several noble women riding and shooting arrows. Concubine Yun's exceptional horsemanship and archery skills made her stand out, capturing the emperor's heart at first sight. In the end, his treatment of her was indeed different from that of others. The case involving concubine Yun implicated many, but the emperor was determined to investigate thoroughly. After personally seeing concubine Yun, he summoned the minister of the court of the imperial clan for questioning. Before long, the investigation took a surprising turn. A maid from Xianfu Palace, unable to withstand the severe torture, confessed that the talismanic objects were placed under the instructions of Consort Da. The emperor ordered the arrest and interrogation of Consort Da's attendants, and evidence gradually surfaced, revealing Consort Da as the mastermind. Consort Da was one of the 4 main consorts and had been by the emperor's side the longest. Usually quiet and unassuming, no one expected her to be involved in such a scandal. However, the emperor showed no leniency toward her as he did with concubine Yun. He issued an edict stripping her of her title and banishing her to the cold palace. On the day the news was announced throughout the 6 palaces, concubine Ning came to Xichen Hall, seeking an audience with the emperor. I went to report to the emperor, who frowned in silence, then waved his hand and said, "I know why she's here. Tell her to go back." When I informed concubine Ning, she seemed to have anticipated it. She calmly said to me, "If he doesn't want to see me, then I'll wait here until he does." Her determination was too strong for her own good, and I sighed inwardly, fearing this would only anger the emperor further. Surprisingly, the emperor eventually allowed her to enter. Concubine Ning entered alone. The emperor did not look at her but said, "If you are here to plead for Consort Da, then you might as well go back. The decree has been issued, and there is no going back on the emperor's words." Concubine Ning smiled faintly, a hint of sarcasm in her eyes. In the emperor's eyes, besides Concubine Yun, are all others insignificant. The emperor remained silent. She lowered her head and said softly, "I expected this. Pleading with you is useless. I only feel sorry for Consort Da. She stayed by your side for so many years, but now, what does she mean to you?" The emperor stood up and slowly walked towards her. It was dusk, and the palace attendants had not yet lit the lamps. The hall was dim, making it hard to discern his emotions. He stopped in front of her, looking at her. "Xieshou Axing, you feel sorry for her, and you resent me for not cherishing others?" He laughed coldly. "In this vast palace, only you have never regarded me. So, whom I love or neglect, what does it matter to you?" Her face turned pale as she looked at him. After a long while, she turned and left. I stood behind the emperor, watching as he remained motionless for a long time after she had left. It wasn't until I called out to him that he finally came to his senses and walked straight to the map hanging on the wall. The enormous map covered almost the entire wall, depicting the vast lands of the Liang Empire, a sight that was both majestic and stirring. The emperor looked at the map, his expression indifferent and even somewhat desolate. He said quietly, "Liang Quan, look at how vast and expansive this empire is. I once thought having it would be the ultimate fulfillment. But now..." A bitter smile appeared on his lips, but he said no more. The emperor did not change his decision, and soon Consort Da was sent to the Western Garden, while Concubine Yun enjoyed even greater favor. I often visited Hanliang Hall to deliver letters from Xieshou Axing to Concubine Ning. Because of Consort Da's incident, she had become much more haggard, her eyes empty as if layered with ashes. Sometimes she would speak a few words to me. In the courtyard, amid the fragrance of flowers, she would sit on a recliner, looking up at the small patch of sky and ask, "Liang Quan, have you ever been to Ningzhou?" I shook my head, and she smiled faintly, her eyes filled with longing. The sky in Ningzhou is very high, very vast. Outside the city are countless green mountains. From the top of the mountains, you can look down at the entire city of Ningzhou. In the distance, you see the layers of green mountains and the rolling sea of clouds. It's a truly beautiful sight. She lowered her head and said softly, "But that beautiful scenery, I'll never see it again." I had heard that when she was in Dingzhou, her father and brother were both formidable generals on the battlefield. She had grown up in the military camp, skilled in riding and archery, her reputation reaching even the capital. But now, she had become a solitary figure in the deep palace, her eyes filled with deep loneliness. I recalled the rumors among the palace servants about her previous husband. It was said he was merely an ordinary merchant in Ningzhou. But perhaps in her eyes, marrying even a humble commoner would have been far better than being confined in this golden cage of the palace. As I returned, the night had already fallen. Only a few lamps were lit in the side hall, casting a dim glow. The emperor stood by the window behind a beaded curtain, bathed in moonlight, his figure cloaked in a frosty white hue. In the past, whenever I saw him, he was always in the brightest and most dazzling places, surrounded by thousands, the center of attention. But tonight, he appeared desolate and somber. He paused slightly, seemingly contemplating, before asking, "Is she still sorrowful?" I was taken aback by his question, even more so by the expression on his face at that moment. After I truthfully answered, he continued to ask a few more questions, all trivial, such as what she had said. I answered each one. Every answer was met with his prolonged silence. I couldn't fathom what he was contemplating in his silence. I was simply astonished that he would exert so much effort to discern her every word, as if trying to glimpse her joys and sorrows from those fragmented words. I went to see my master. Due to his advanced age and having no family left, he chose to stay in the palace. The emperor had ordered a small courtyard to be provided for his retirement. My master and I chatted about various topics. After a moment of contemplation, I asked, "Our dynasty has a tradition of sending princes to the frontier military camps for training. When His Majesty was sent to Ningzhou, you accompanied him, didn't you?" "Yes." The military governor of Ningzhou at that time was Ningpin's father, right? He took a sip of tea and turned to ask me, Quan, what exactly do you want to know?" "There are many rumors about His Majesty and Ningpin," I said softly. "They say he brought her into the palace to gain the support of the Shui family, that he keeps her around now only because of the crown prince, and that he despises her. But I feel perhaps no one has ever truly understood His Majesty's heart." Before long, news came that De Fei had passed away. It was night when the emperor heard the news. He remained silent for a long time and then simply told me to go to Hanliang Hall to see Ningpin. When I arrived at Hanliang Hall, I happened to encounter a eunuch hurriedly reporting the news. Ningpin had just finished taking her medicine. Hearing the eunuch say, "Madam, De Fei has passed away," her body swayed, and I had to support her. She then began to cough violently, unable to stop, as if trying to cough out her very lungs. Her health was poor. It was said that when she was about to give birth, she learned of the Shui family's downfall, and the shock nearly claimed her life and that of her child. Although she was saved, her health deteriorated. "Please take care, madam." She didn't respond, just sat there in a daze. I didn't dare to leave her, so I stayed by her side until she was assisted to bed late at night. Watching her sleep, I felt a pang of pity. As the candlelight flickered and the room fell silent, I was about to rise when I noticed a tall figure standing behind me. Startled by his sudden presence, I saw him approach her side, his lips pressed into a thin line. He quietly gazed at her, as if looking at a treasure he dared not scrutinize, even in private. After a long while, he pulled out a handkerchief from his sleeve and gently wiped her brow. His movements were careful, his eyes full of boundless affection. At that moment, all his imperial majesty was gone. He was simply a man, almost humble. "Ah-ing, I regret it," he whispered, holding her hand. "But I know you won't give me another chance to make amends." I had learned some things from my master about their past. When he went to Ningzhou, he was just one of the many princes, not favored by the late emperor. She was the daughter of Shui, the military governor of Ningzhou, raised in the military camp alongside her father and brothers. On his first day there, Shui accompanied him to familiarize himself with the Ningzhou camp. From a distance, he saw a woman riding a horse and drawing a bow, dressed in a bright red skirt, as dazzling as fire. I remembered people saying he later favored Yunfei because of her archery skills, claiming he fell in love at first sight. But no one knew that his first sight of her reminded him of another woman. He stayed in Ningzhou for 5 years. During those 5 years, his eyes saw only one person. 5 years later, when the late emperor fell seriously ill, he had to return to the capital. He made a solemn vow to her, promising never to marry anyone else and never to betray her. But vows are often made to be broken. In the struggle for the throne, to gain the support of influential families, he married another woman, who would later become the short-lived empress. After he ascended the throne, she married someone else. And then, we reached the present. Now, with the empire under his control, he says he regrets it. After De Fei passed away, her illness worsened. Not long after, the emperor decreed that Crown Prince Chongning would be sent to the frontier military camp for training. It was customary in Daliang for princes to be sent to the military camps, but this time it was too sudden, especially since Chongning was only 12 years old, still so young. He went to see her once. She lay in bed and slowly awoke at the sound of footsteps. Upon seeing him, her eyes turned cold. The setting sun streamed through the lattice window, but her face remained deathly pale, devoid of any warmth. She stared at him and asked, Have you always believed that Ninger is not your child? She had been diagnosed with pregnancy shortly after entering the palace, and many people whispered that the child might not even be the emperor's. Rest well and don't let your mind wander, he said softly. Her eyes were filled with desolation as she slowly lowered her head and murmured, "You've always been cold to Ninger because you don't believe he's your child, right? Then why did you bring me into the palace? Only to trap me here for life, to compete with all the other women for just a bit of your favor. Is this what you wanted?" My master said that when he first heard news of her marriage, he rode a fast horse through the night to Ningzhou. But her mind was made up. She was proud and resolute. He had broken his promise first, and how could she forgive him? Helpless, he wished her happiness and vowed never to disturb her again. Yet later, after he ascended the throne, he broke his word. He had her husband assassinated and brought her into the palace. How could a woman who had already been married win the emperor's favor? So everyone said that the emperor did it to win over her father and brothers, and when they fell from grace, he withdrew his favor. At first, I thought we could each fulfill our own roles and not interfere with each other, but later I realized I couldn't do it. His eyes were bloodshot as he stared at her, as if seeing the woman who once wore the bridal crown and robe to marry another man. That gaze seemed full of hate, pain, and an irreparable sorrow. I had never seen him so distraught. It was hard to imagine what he felt when he heard she married someone else. His current anguish was probably nothing compared to what he felt then. He slowly began to laugh. The emperor, who held an empire in his hands, now lowered his gaze like a defeated general. "I know, with your character, you must hate me for forcing you into the palace. But it doesn't matter. Compared to watching you marry someone else and become another man's wife, what can't I bear?" His voice was hoarse, filled with the unending sorrow of countless days and nights. On the day the crown prince left the capital, the emperor ordered me to take him to bid farewell to Ningpin. She was sitting on the warm bed when Chongning entered and kowtowed to her. The sudden turn of events happened in an instant, and I barely had time to react. He pulled a dagger from his sleeve and lunged at his mother. Without thinking, I threw myself forward and managed to deflect the dagger. "Ning'e, you." I heard her weak and wavering voice behind me. "Your Highness, she is your mother consort." I gritted my teeth. "She is not." He was almost hysterical, his eyes bloodshot. "Her child died, and she took me to cover up the secret, even killing my birth mother." I remembered what my master had once said, "The truth is always more absurd than any lie." No one knew how Chongning had discovered the truth, but everything suddenly made sense. The case of the cursed object, De Fei's death, and the sudden decision to send the crown prince away. For years, the emperor had been distant towards Chongning, keeping them apart, making her believe he doubted the child's paternity. But perhaps he was afraid that if the secret were revealed, the more she loved the child, the harder it would be for her to bear the truth. It turned out he had been protecting her in the cruelest way. When the emperor arrived, Chongning had already been subdued by the guards. The emperor walked up and kicked him to the ground. The child's swap back then was all my doing. De Fei did not know. She did not know either. The emperor took the sword from the guard's waist and threw it on the ground. As for De Fei's death, I acted when I discovered she was investigating the truth. The guilty party is me. If you want revenge, come at me. Chongning lay on the ground, sobbing. In the end, he was the most innocent of all. The emperor finally softened and said, "It was my fault." Afterwards, he waved for the guards to take Chongning away. He entered the inner chamber, where she had woken up, lying on the bed, staring blankly at him. The child, the one who didn't make it, her voice was hoarse, was mine. Her eyes, sunken and dry, bore into him. He was silent, then finally nodded, his voice trembling. "When the disaster struck the Shui family, you went into premature labor. The doctor said only one of you could be saved. I knew if the child was lost too, I could never keep you. At that time, De Fei had just given birth, so I had the children swapped." She slowly closed her eyes, and when she reopened them, they were void of any life. "That child, you didn't want to keep him, did you?" Xieshou. He looked at her in shock, her words cutting deep. He seemed unable to bear it, slowly speaking, "Am I so despicable in your eyes?" The room fell silent. Between them lay years of accumulated misunderstandings, layer upon layer of hatred, growing over time into an insurmountable barrier. She motioned for the maids to help her sit up, leaning weakly against the headboard. The setting sun cast long shadows, filling the room with a poignant sorrow. "Su-sun," she suddenly called him by name softly. How did we end up like this?" "That year, when I left Ningzhou, I told you to wait for me. I said that I would definitely ask the emperor's permission to marry and return for you. You said Su-yun, I will wait for you, but I will only wait this one time. If you betray me, I will never trust you again." The emperor lowered his head, mumbling, "I knew you were of this nature. I knew it well." But he still betrayed her, and everything that followed was just mistake after mistake. Chongling was eventually sent to the border, and the emperor never set foot in Chengqian Palace again. He got up in the middle of the night without uttering a word and sat silently. After a long time, there was a commotion outside, saying that Yun consort requested to see the emperor. It was then that I remembered that after Chongling left the capital, Yun consort had pretended to be ill and didn't come out. "Let her in," the emperor nonchalantly ordered. I was shocked when Yun consort came in. She looked like a completely different person, haggard, and her hair was disheveled. She knelt on the polished marble floor, looking directly at the emperor and asked, "I dare to ask the emperor, how long do you want me to pretend to be ill?" The emperor looked up at her and said indifferently, "What? Do you feel aggrieved?" The emperor deemed it, so thus I dare not complain. But even if I am to be punished, I should know for what crime. Your Highness, without a reason, punished me. I live in fear. Without a reason? He sneered, went over to her and held her chin. Why did the virtuous consort suddenly investigate the affairs of that year? How did Chongling know about it? You have calculated well. Used me to get rid of virtuous consort, and left no way for me and her to reconcile. Two birds with one stone. I really underestimated you in the past. Everyone in the palace was blinded. The only one who saw through everything was Yun consort. She even found out about the past. She was indeed smart, revealing the truth to the virtuous consort, forcing the emperor to get rid of the virtuous consort to cover up his past actions. But because of this, when Chongling found out, naturally, he would blame everything on Consort Ning. Consort Ning not only took a child from the virtuous consort, but also, Chongling held the grudge of his mother's murder against her. He is the only son of the emperor, so the world will naturally fall into his hands in the future. By then, how could he let Consort Ning go? This seemingly naive and spoiled woman harbored such profound thoughts, but at this moment, she looked up in shock, tears flowing down her cheeks. "Yes, Your Majesty. Why did you dote on me?" she asked with a bitter smile. "At first, I was naive and thought I was just lucky, but later I realized. You were just afraid that after the Shui family's decline, she would have no one to rely on, afraid that the other consorts would take advantage of her, so you put me in the line of fire, to take those arrows for her. You said I was calculating, but no one has planned for my sake like you've arranged everything in secret for her. I can only look out for myself. Do you know, Your Majesty, that in your dreams, it's her name you call out? All these years, I've been nothing but her shadow. She wasn't particularly beautiful, but at this moment, she seemed inherently tragic, wrapped in a sadness that went to her bones. You once said that when you love someone, you should hide it well, don't let people see through, don't put her in danger. Then these years, what am I to you?" He turned his back, unwilling to look at her, and ordered the eunuch, "Take her out." The room fell silent again, and he stood there quietly. "Liang Quan, did I do something wrong?" After a while, he abruptly spoke up and asked me. The candlelight flickered, reflecting the continuous glimmer in his eyes. At this moment, even the Supreme Emperor seemed like a fallen mortal, standing solitary in the shadows. "In the beginning, I took her by force. I killed that man. Everyone underneath was guessing that I must have loved her immensely since she was pregnant. It was also when the Empress passed away. Did you know, Liang Quan? I was actually somewhat delighted. I thought, once the child was born, I could rightfully let her ascend to the throne. At that time I was looking forward to our future with great joy. But then the truth about the Liang family came out. Her father committed suicide out of guilt. Despite my precautions, someone still delivered the news to her directly, which almost led to 2 deaths with 1 life. I knew someone was orchestrating this behind my back. They were afraid I would really give her everything. Only then did I realize that my love could harm her. At that moment, I truly felt fear. I thought nothing else mattered. As long as she was safe by my side, even if she hated me all her life, I didn't mind. I thought that if I kept her far away, no one would want to harm her again. In the past, the Xue family situation was very peculiar. During the prince's struggle for the throne, the Xue family did indeed support Prince Wei. However, after the emperor took over the throne, he brought a daughter of the Xue family into the palace. It was unimaginable that they would rise up in rebellion again. Moreover, at that time, the court of justice hadn't sentenced the crime, and the emperor hadn't issued a decree. But Xue had committed suicide at home. At the time, Consort Ning was pregnant, and the emperor surely wouldn't annihilate the Xue family for the sake of his own progeny. But Xue's death was considered suicide out of guilt, and there was no one left to testify. It seems that someone fearing Consort Ning's favor and the birth of another prince that would potentially making her queen had a hand in the affairs of the Xue family. The daughter of a criminal official, no matter how much the emperor dotes on her, does not have the right to be made empress. Your Majesty, this is not your fault, I said softly. When you care too much about someone, you lose your composure. Hold too loosely and you'll fear losing them, but hold too tight and you'll fear hurting her. He walked to his desk, took a wooden box out of the drawer, and opened it. Inside lay a piece of decorated paper. The dim light of the candle illuminated the words on it so that I could see them. It was a marriage letter, which read, "Hoping to be husband and wife through all lifetimes." This was clearly the vow made by Emperor Ming and Yang in the Longevity Palace, pledging inalienable love on the night of Xieshou, Chinese Valentine's Day. On the Xieshou of that year, I went to the night market with her. There was a stage set up in the distance, performing the Longevity Palace. He started to speak softly, but it was unclear who he was speaking to. At that time, hearing this line, we felt a deep bond and privately made a marriage vow, relying on it as our promise. We said it in line with the play, forgetting that the Longevity Palace is actually a sad story. She was on the brink of death, at times seeming mad. The royal physicians said she was overly traumatized. I paid her a visit with the letter sent by Shui, hoping that reading the letter would lighten her mood. She seemed substantially more lucid, but when I handed her the letter, she did not take it. She just turned her head to look at me and asked, "Liang Quan, Shui is long gone, isn't he?" My hand trembled. I tried to compose myself. "Your Highness, why make such baseless claims? Doesn't the young Master Shui write to you every month from the south of 5 ridge mountains?" His imitation of Shui's penmanship is very alike, but no matter how similar, a fake will never become real, will it? I remained silent, recalling countless nights when the emperor stood at the desk by the window, meticulously imitating Shui's handwriting and writing these letters, then delivering them to her. It turns out, she had guessed it all along. Young Master Shui passed away on his way to the place of exile. His Majesty was worried about you. The Shui family is gone, my father is gone, my brother is gone, my child is gone. She mumbled, "Now, there is really nothing left for me to be sorrowful about." As she spoke, she started coughing, covering her mouth. Her coughing was earth-shattering. Between her fingers, trails of deep red started to seep out. I was surprised. Before I could manage a sound, a figure stepped forward from behind me. "What's wrong? Why is this happening?" I had never seen the emperor so panicky before. I realized he had been standing outside the door all this time, just like countless nights in the past when he secretly stood under her eaves, and she never knew. She was in his arms, Void of any life force, her pale countenance resembled a wilting flower. "I want to go back to Ningzhou," she said in a daze, uncertain whether she was conscious. "Ningzhou." "Okay, to Ningzhou," he said soothingly, as if comforting a child. "I'll take you to Ningzhou." "I also want." She raised her eyes, looking at him. "What else do you want?" he asked. "I want," she gave him a pale smile, "to never see you again." Ningzhou was too far away after all, and His Majesty could not accompany her there. He ordered people to decorate the Western Garden exactly like Shue's residence in Ningzhou and had her move in. He truly never went to see her. Every day, I would quietly go to the Western Garden, reporting every detail of her life to him. Later, her condition got worse, and she slowly began to forget the past. Then I asked him, if she couldn't remember the past anymore, why didn't he visit her? He just smiled, his eyes full of melancholy. What good would seeing her do? Besides, I broke many promises I made to her. The least I can do is keep the last one. When she passed away, he didn't go to say his last goodbye either. He simply ordered her to be sent back to Ningzhou for burial, on a green mountain from where you could see for miles. She loved freedom, he said softly with a bitter smile. I've known that all along, but I selfishly wanted to keep her by my side, and I've never made her happy all these years. A few years after her death, he fell ill and passed away. The eldest prince returned to the capital to ascend the throne. When he asked me what I planned to do, I said I wanted to guard the emperor's tomb, and he granted it. I often sat in front of his tomb, telling him that the red leaves in the capital are red again, the spring mountain flowers are blooming. As I was speaking, I stopped, and after a long time, I asked the question that had always been lingering in my heart. Your Majesty, do you think it's worth it to love someone so silently and patiently? But there was no answer in the empty surroundings. I remembered a rainy night long ago, when he stood under the eaves, saying, "When I married someone else for the throne, I knew well that my actions were irrevocable in this life, but at that time I thought it wasn't a big deal. I thought I could bear it for a few years and it would pass." There was a mist in his eyes, like the lingering sense of loss that had not dissipated over the years. His voice lowered, blending with the dim weather of that moment. I felt unbearable at that time and thought it was only temporary, but it turned out it was for a lifetime.